Hey, all you theater enthusiasts out there, I'm Jay.
And I'm Gabby.
And welcome to the first ever episode of Stage Fight, brought to you by Just a Touch Podco. Now, you may be wondering, who are these wacky people talking in our earphones right now, or even on your YouTube screen? Funny you asked. I am a theater professional. I work for a arts education company, but I also have had my own shows produced off-Broadway, in regional circuits, and even in festival circuits. I'm a librettist, I'm a lyricist, I'm a performer, a director, a costume designer, basically anything that you could do in the theater I have done both on a community and professional level. And now I'm the Associate Artistic Director of an incredible arts nonprofit. And most importantly, I am a self-described and peer-prescribed and reviewed human Broadway encyclopedia. Now, my friend over here.
Hi, as I said, my name is Gabby, and I am not a theater professional. I am a theater hobbyist, though I am pretty heavily involved, especially where Jay is involved. But by trade, I am a public school English teacher. Specifically, I teach middle school. And for these podcast episodes, I will be proudly representing the theater idiots or the theater laymen who have a lot of passion for the art, but not necessarily the knowledge to back it up.
And that's why we created a show like this, to give you the knowledge and also empower you to check out shows that you've never seen before. That's why we did Stage Fight.
And if you're like me at all, that is quite a few of them. The list is extensive.
What list? What are you talking about, Gabby?
Oh, do you mean the 512 show-long list that you sent me for this?
Is it 512 shows? Did I put that together?
I believe you did, you psycho.
Well, there is a reason for it. A couple years ago, I had been listening to a bunch of albums while I was driving along. I had about a 4-hour drive, and I just needed some comfort shows to listen to. Now, if you're anybody like me, when someone turns around and says, "Oh, you like theater? What's your favorite musical?" it makes you kind of close up inside and go, "Oh God, that entire question is destroying my mind," because it's like choosing your favorite child. But it did have me begging the question as I'm listening to all these musicals like Parade, Ragtime, Heathers, Oklahoma, Carousel. What the best musical of all time objectively is? Because for me, I can't choose one. For my partner over here, she has definitely chosen hers.
There's one true option. It is the only correct answer, and I will convince you by the end of it that I'm right.
We'll see. We'll see. So what I did was inspired by that, and also an incredible theater TikToker named the Musical Theater Dealer. I compiled a list of 512 musicals that we are going to break into 16 categories with 32 musicals per category. Now, you may be wondering, why 16 categories with 32 musicals per category? And that's because we are doing a musical theater March Madness style bracket elimination.
Go sports, go birds.
The reason why we're doing a bracket style elimination is because it is the most objective way to be subjective. Now, if you're anyone like me, who, while being a writer, is also pretty illiterate when it comes to, what words in the English lexicon actually mean, I'm going to throw it over to our English teacher of telling me what objective versus subjective actually means.
Welcome to class, friends. So, subjective is a very personal opinion. There is no sincere universal truth ascribed to it. It is all based on personal opinion and personal opinion alone. It can be backed up by previous knowledge and other experiences, but it is not considered a universal truth. Something being objective, on the other hand, is considered a universal truth. There's concrete evidence backing it up. Everyone kind of universally agrees this is the truth, this is the only truth in this particular regard. Usually it's used for scientific evidence, or if you're doing some sort of literary analysis, which I do a lot with my students. That's kind of the general gist of those two terms.
Thank you very much, Gabby.
Of course.
Now, like I said, bracket-style eliminations are the best way to be objectively subjective. And that is because you have to pit two individual titles against each other, and putting personal feelings somewhat to the side, have to really look at which one tells the better story, which score is, fuller or more comprehensive, which one, if you were just listening to this album for the first time, never seen it before, gives you a better listening experience, which one has a better script or better writing, which one potentially is more culturally or historically relevant between awards or common consciousness zeitgeist kind of situations. So while we may have some shows that pop up like Sweeney Todd versus Into the Woods, although I think Gabby rigged it so that way it wasn't a competition anymore.
I did. I didn't want to do that. That would have hurt my soul so severely.
We have to sometimes talk about some of our favorite musicals, but know that at the end of the day, they may not be out the other option that we are discussing them with. And therefore, while we have our personal opinions about it, we are still being objective at the end of the day by trying to figure out which one is truly the better out of the two. Now, Gabby, did I hear you ask, what categories do we have?
I sure did. Do you want me to ask that now?
I would love that.
Absolutely. I will happily be the voice of the people. Jay, what are those 16 psychotic categories that you've created for us?
I will gladly be referred to as the musical theater psycho. Our 16 categories are Golden Age known, being musicals before the year 1970. That's how I'm interpreting Golden Age. But musicals before the year 1970 that are pretty commonly recognizable or fan favorites or have just kind of existed in some kind of higher plane in the common consciousness. Then we have Golden Age unknown, which are shows before 1970 that are very good or questionably good, potentially, but are off a little bit more on the beaten path. Shows like 110 in the Shade, Anyone Can Whistle, Applause, Babes in Arms. These are shows that have a lot of cultural relevance and definitely have productions and fans out there, but they're more likely to be seen at like a City Center encores than get a full-blown revival on Broadway right off the bat. And it's just because they don't always have the most name recognition to the Joes and Larrys and Marthas and Bettys in Middle America who only really have a connection to Broadway through what movie musicals they have seen or what performs on the Tonys each year. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got it.
I'm glad. Then we have Game Changers, which are musicals that have shaken up what we define as musical theater, either from a stylistic, musical, story, or production aspect, or even cultural aspect. Then we have Off the Beaten Path, which are musicals that are relatively new or relatively indie in the way of, grassroots musicals. And while being extremely cool to look at, they also haven't received any giant productions. So there's not necessarily anything more that we can go off of than maybe their albums and a spec script or a few clips that we can look at. So they're going to definitely be our deep dive into the unknown when it comes to looking at musical theater. Then we have jukebox musicals, which takes the pre-existing music of a particular, band, musical, genre, decade, or even composer, and uses them to tell a completely original show or story. Now, you're not going to find a lot of the musicals about individuals in this category. It's mostly going to be shows that are either original or fictional stories or musical reviews, like
Think Mamma Mia.
Mamma Mia versus like Sondheim on Sondheim. Okay? Then we have bio musicals, which some are jukebox musicals, but for the most part are shows that tell the story of an individual's life. So while we have Beautiful Carole King musical and Jersey Boys in this category, we also have Bonnie and Clyde, we have Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, we have Chaplin, we have The Cher Show, which is a bio musical that kind of did things in a different way with how it was a jukebox musical as well. So that's really cool. Then we have Family Friendly, which are all of your, family musicals like Seussical and Junie B. Jones and Anastasia and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Freaky Friday. These are usually works that are somewhat based on a pre-existing book or movie, but are geared towards family and children. And when that happens, we are always going to use the stage interpretation of those shows, especially as we get into screen to stage and literary. We're always going to use the stage adaptation of those shows, if at all possible. Some of these properties, like we are going to look at Bombshell and the Bio musicals, was never produced outside of the one concert for charity that they did. But still, there's enough material to work off of to get a full sense of what Bombshell would have looked like as a full musical. Then we have screen to stage, which are all movies that then became musicals. So we have Back to the Future, Big Fish, Cry Baby, Death Becomes Her, Dogfight, Full Monty, and more. And then on the flip side of that, we have literary, which are musicals that are based on either books, or I also included the Bible in here, Greek mythology, and Shakespeare.
Hey, Bible's a book. Bible is a book.
Yes, but I think some people...
Actually, multiple books.
Thank you,
If you
Gab.
think about it. You're welcome.
Then we have novelty and parodies, which are all like comedy-based shows or niche shows. You're gonna have your Disenchanteds in here. You're gonna have your Team Star Kids in here. You're gonna have your Gutenberg the Musical, and weirdly the Taco Bell Mexican Pizza Musical. Yeah, that happened. So I'm excited to take a look at that category. Then we have major musicals from the late 20th century, so no longer in the golden age, but still musicals we should be talking about from 1970 through the year 1999. And then we have 21st century, which are all musicals that we should talk about from the year 2000 to now. An entire category for LGBTQ stories, and an entire category for POC stories. LGBTQ stories being musicals that have any kind of deep impact within their characters or their story relating to the LGBTQ diaspora. I'm going to call it a diaspora because at this point we feel like a diaspora. Shows are like Falsettos, From Here to Eternity, Fun Home, Kinky Boots, La Cage aux Folles, and much more. Then we have POC stories, which feels a little weird to basically take every POC and kind of put them into one big category, but we only had 16 categories and we really wanted to feature these shows. So we have shows that pertain to African American or Black stories like Color Purple, Dessa Rose, Caroline or Change. But we also have shows that pertain to maybe our Asian demographic like Miss Saigon and Pacific Overtures. And then we have shows that deal with our Caribbean and Latin America diaspora, which are like Once on This Island and In the Heights. Then we have star vehicles, and these are musicals that mainly have like one huge person in the cast that they put on top billing. Shows like American Psycho, Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, Gypsy, Hello Dolly, Last 5 Years, Little Women. You have one character that's more forefront than others, or it's a like 2 to 3 person musical, so you have to cast the best names for those productions. Like John and Jen featured Kate Baldwin, and she is huge and a love of mine in this Broadway community. And then we have shows that are more so ensemble pieces. Bandstand, Come From Away, Godspell, I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change. Jacques Brel is Alive and Well in Paris, and more. So we're kind of allowing a lot of these categories to have a juxtaposition to something else.
We did it. The most intimidating part is over.
If you're still listening, thank you. And most importantly, every episode we are going to pit at least 2 musicals against each other. Once we get more comfortable, it may be like 4 musicals against each other, doing 2 brackets in one episode. But at the end of the episode, we will declare a winner between the musicals that we have discussed. That'll be what stays in our bracket system. But you guys, listening or watching, may disagree with us. And that is okay. That's what we want.
We might even disagree with each other. So you are more than welcome to disagree with us as well. So you can feel more than welcome to join us. We will be posting blank brackets with each of the categories and all of the shows. Not necessarily in the order that we'll do them, but definitely with the pairings that we are going to do. We're going to have those posted on our website as well as on our varying social media pages. So YouTube, There's going to be a Reddit page that you guys can go check out. We have our Instagram already set up. So if you're following us there, you'll be able to follow along with packets of your own.
Now, there may be some shows that we are not either very passionate about or knowledgeable about that we're going to be diving in completely blind. But we have plenty of friends who are theater professionals, theater lovers, maybe Broadway performers, off-Broadway performers, designers, directors, producers come on and basically try to give us a little bit of a persuasive essay as to why their show is the best. They may come on and talk about why Sweeney Todd is a cultural revelation, or they may come on and tell us why, honestly, why Allegiance should have had more love on Broadway, but that's neither here nor there. So it's not just going to be us for the next however long it takes us to get through this that you're going to be listening to. We're going to have a lot of friends come on and a lot of fun times just listening to musical theater and introducing ourselves to shows that we've never heard of before and reintroducing ourselves to shows that we love and seeing them in a whole new light. So that makes me excited. Gabby, are you excited?
I'm thrilled. So happy to be here.
Now that we got the exposition out of the way, it's time to get to the real fun of today, which means it's time to introduce our two contenders of our first ever episode. So, funny enough, we are pitting the first ever Tony Award winner for Best Musical against the 17th winner of Best Musical. We are pitting Kiss Me Kate against A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, two shows that actually catapulted both of their respective composers into probably the height of their success. Kiss Me Kate has been seen as Cole Porter's most successful musical, and it was the first time that Stephen Sondheim both did the lyrics and the score for a musical, and really became the Sondheim that we all know and love. So before
bow before the king. We miss you.
Every day.
Pouring out for a real one.
Before we get started on breaking them down, Gabby, do you have any prior thoughts or knowledge about either one of these shows before we kind of started this today?
I absolutely do. So, I am fairly familiar with Kiss Me Kate. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I actually wore a Shakespeare shirt. I know y'all probably can't read it, but it's the line, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream from Hamlet. I wanted to try and be on theme relatively, so I think you know where my allegiance might lie today.
It doesn't matter where your allegiance lies.
I know. It's all objective. But I have actually heard of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum before. Shout out to my community college friend James. This is his favorite musical of all time, and he is not a theater person at all. So wanted to give him a shout out, even though he recommended it to me so many times. I did not listen to it until preparing for this episode, so I'm so sorry, James. I feel like I have failed you, but also shout out because you're the reason I even knew that this show existed in the first place.
Well, you know what? You don't have to apologize to James because now you're making it up to him.
I've listened to it now, James. Yay.
For me, Kiss Me Kate has actually been one of my favorite Golden Age musicals. Again, not showing my bias. I don't have a bias because I actually adore both of these shows. But has been one of my favorite Golden Age musicals since I was a kid. I had seen the PBS pro shot of Rachel York doing it with, I think, the Canadian cast that had that had been touring from the Broadway cast that was the Marin.
I never know how to pronounce her name.
By the time we get to Ragtime and Carrie, I better know how to pronounce her name, or she will come and haunt us from a Sarah style.
We'll figure it out. We'll fix it in post. Got it.
But I used to watch the Rachel York pro shot all the time. And funny enough, in my 7th grade year in middle school, we had to do a kind of a walk through history night where we all got to choose different moments from ancient Egypt all the way through the Renaissance to bring to life. And me, my friend Galen, my friend Harrison, and my twin sister, Marissa, who will probably be on a few of these episodes, we all decided to do Shakespeare. Obviously, we were all theater kids. And I advocated to do Taming of the Shrew, and they let me get away with saying the word bastard because I said it's in the text, so we have to do it. And that's how a bunch of 12-year-olds got away with saying the word bastard all night in front of their parents, and the adults loved it.
I'm not going to say what the 12-year-olds I teach get away with saying.
Yeah, well, it's a very different time and a very
bastard puts it lightly.
But on the flip side, Forum wasn't my first introduction to Sondheim. Like many, Into the Woods was my first introduction to Sondheim. But it's definitely one of those shows that constantly like itches the back of my brain a little bit. Both while I'm listening to it or thinking about it, I'm always like, oh, this is a really funny show. And a lot of Sondheim's work, while having humor and wit always involved, are never outright farcical. So for Sondheim's first true solo outing as a lyricist and composer, outside of like Saturday Night and his smaller shows, being this giant farcical romp, I always adored. And for me, and the version that I suggested to Gabby to listen to for this podcast episode, was the revival with Nathan Lane is always my favorite version. And fun fact, in that production, you had both Timon and Pumbaa in that cast. Yes.
Can I admit something real quick?
Yeah.
So in my tiny little lizard brain, it did not connect. Like that the voices, like the actors were the same. And I was listening to the album. I was like, this sounds like Timon. Why does this sound like Timon? And so I just imagined the animated little Timon just running around on this big ass Broadway stage.
And I think Nathan Lane would either love that or hate that. So it was really funny to pit these two shows against each other for me because I do adore both of them very much. Stylistically, they're also two very different shows. I think that Kiss Me Kate is one of the most quintessential Golden Age musicals, also because of its styling and the way that it works. And you can see plenty of shows almost being referential of it. Shows like Cameron Ebb's Curtains, or even parts of Noises Off has very similar feelings to the onstage, backstage kind of mishaps and misadventures that these characters go on. Funny enough.
Yeah, Play That Goes Wrong. Also, very similar vibe.
Very similar vibe. But on the flip side, there are also two incredible, again, farcical shows in a lot of ways, dealing with mistaken identities and star-crossed lovers and, people being forced against their will to do things that they don't necessarily want to do, and hijinks ensuing because of it. So I think, in a weird way, on paper, they look very different. But in practice, they have a lot of similarities that I really got to dig into while looking at this.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, are we ready to dive into show number one?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Show number one that we are talking about today is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which I'm going to affectionately just call Forum for the rest of this, because
it's such a long title.
But do you know why that title is the way it is?
So, actually, I do. I did a little bit of research and so I did see that it is a reference to vaudeville.
It is. In a lot of the comedic acts of vaudeville, especially farcical acts within the vaudeville circuit, when they would do little skits and things like that, a common saying, kind of like how in the 1980s and 90s, it was like, where's the beef? Or airplane food with stand-up comedians. It was, a funny thing happened on the way to the theater. So In ancient Rome, you didn't have necessarily a theater, so a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. Forum is a riotous farce that became a landmark of Broadway musical history, bending slapstick humor, clever wordplay, and a timeless story of mistaken identities and absurdity. And this musical was the brainchild of legendary composer Stephen Sondheim, making his Broadway debut as a composer and lyricist, and has since become one of his most recognizable and iconic enduring works in the American theater canon. So the concept of a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum emerged when Harold Prince, a seasoned Broadway producer and director, approached Stephen Sondheim to work on a brand new project. Now, Prince was fascinated by the idea of creating a Broadway musical that was inspired by the ancient comedies of Plautus, a Roman playwright whose works were known for their many zany plots, mistaken identities, and farcical situations.
He is very silly. I've read one of his works before in my ancient, like my world history literature class in community college.
Now, Sondheim was tasked with writing both the music and the lyrics, his first full musical composition on Broadway, while the book was written by Bart Shevlov and Larry Gelbart. It was written by Bert and Larry, who would go on to create the sitcom MASH. Fun fact.
Jay, I thought it was Bert and Ernie.
No, they're Muppets. These are the people who created the most famous comedy series of all time, MASH. Yeah.
I should have worn my MASH shirt.
Anyway, the collaboration of Stephen Sondheim, Shevlov, and Gelbart resulted in a script full of rapid-fire jokes, colorful characters, and farcical situations that would give the production its breakneck pacing and sharp comedic edge. With its opening in May of 1962 at the Mark Helliger Theater, later renamed the Hollywood Theater, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum was an immediate success, capturing Broadway's attention with its madcap energy and its sharp, witty dialogue. This show was one of the first of its kind to push the boundaries of traditional musical theater by blending classical farce with modern sensibilities of Broadway. Now, that's all about its production history and creative history. What about the actual show itself? I think it's time for us to go through a brief little synopsis about what A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum is about. The story centers on Pseudolus, a quick-witted and opportunistic slave who dreams of buying his freedom. Pseudolus serves Senex, an aging Roman gentleman, and his wife Domina, who is a formidable matron with a keen eye for discipline. Now, their son Hero is a hopelessly romantic and somewhat clueless young man who falls in love with Philia, a beautiful, if somewhat dim-witted courtesan who just so happens to belong to the lascivious and overbearing Marcus Lycus, a dealer in human pleasure. However, Hero is not content with simply purchasing Philia's services. He wants to marry her. And there's obviously a catch. Philia is about to be sold to Miles Glorious, a pompous, bravado-filled Roman soldier who has been promised to take her off of Hero's hands. Hero is completely heartbroken and desperate, but that's where Pseudolus steps in, who's offering to help him win Philia's heart and win his freedom in the process. And what ensues is a madcap story about pirates and schmex workers and love and the endearing power that human connection has, all told in the most absurd and nonsensical way possible. It's just a madcap, crazy mess of a show. It just makes it so much more amazing to watch and to take in. Now, I have seen a production of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, but Gabby, you said you've never seen it in person, right?
Nope, just the one cast recording that you sent to me.
So let's move into an actual conversation about the show and talk about the score, the story, and our listening experience. And we also both had the script, so we were kind of reading and listening and reading and listening and kind of working our way through that way. So Gabby, do you want to give me your first thoughts on Forum?
Yeah, this might be, again, I know we said we were going to be objective in our subjectivity, but I am also very biased. in the way I feel about Sondheim shows, especially Sondheim and Andrew Lloyd Webber. I get very opinionated about with their shows. And this was not my favorite Sondheim show, unfortunately. It was really hard because I listened to as much as I could without reading along with the script. And then I started going back and forth because I could not follow the story without it. It was really difficult. And other than Comedy Tonight, Lovely, and Pretty Little Picture, if you asked me to like hum or sing any of them right now, I couldn't. And that's notable because I only stopped listening to it as we got ready to record. So I was listening to it within the past like 2 hours. So those are the concerns that I have about the show, personally.
So funny enough, I'm pretty sure this is the show that started the concept of Sondheim is not a commercial composer / lyricist, in the fact that you can't have a hummable melody. Up until this point, he's just been a lyricist. When he did West Side Story, Leonard Bernstein wrote the music and he wrote the lyrics. And then when he did Gypsy, Julie Stein wrote the music and he did the lyrics. So there's this impression that he's always been more of a wordsmith than a composer, which we all knew to be false. But back in the 1960s, not a lot of people did. So you then hear songs like Dirty Old Man and Everybody's Gotta Have a Maid, and you're kind of, or The House of Marcus Lycus, and you're sitting there going, they're good in the story, but they're not necessarily songs that are going to make me go, oh, I want to sing that, or I want to listen to that.
Yeah, it didn't feel, this might sound crazy for me to say, it didn't feel like Sondheim to me. It is, from my experience and my knowledge of Sondheim shows, it is the least Sondheim sounding Sondheim.
I hesitate to agree with you, but I do understand where you're coming from. Again, this is the first time on a large stage in a commercial sense he's been asked to be both lyricist and composer. So like anybody really starting out of the gate in this way, a lot of people came to the table thinking that they knew what to expect from Sondheim, and this is where a lot of what we know today as Stephen Sondheim started in its infancy. So you can actually hear, his repetition of themes and the way that he uses patter and things like that stylistically in what he's doing here. But it's not until his subsequent pieces, like Anyone Can Whistle and Do I Hear a Waltz, that they start becoming a little bit more succinct and fleshed out. And then once we start getting into Company is when really we are hitting Sondheim the way that we know Sondheim.
Yeah, and I would like everyone to keep in mind that my two favorite Sondheim shows are Into the Woods and Sweeney Todd, and I do feel very passionately about those two. So that also plays into my statement of this doesn't sound like Sondheim to me, because I always think City on Fire, the overture from Into the Woods, and the whole like prologue and intro to that, like that's what I think of as like quintessential Sondheim for me.
And meanwhile, I'm a Merrily person, which makes me part of a minority.
I don't know anything about Merrily. I would have if I had gotten tickets to the revival. They were so expensive.
And we both kept like not getting the lottery.
Oh, baby, I was trying.
But to go to your point about like hard to follow the story, I agree with that. And I think even in the original cast recording with Ciro Mostel, or even in the film or other subsequent recordings, it is very much still hard to follow the way that these songs are, because they are so moment and story driven in a way, not necessarily from an emotional standpoint, but from a plot device and farcical standpoint, that without the setups, it's almost like you're getting a punchline of a joke without getting the setup of a joke. And it's also not the longest of his scores. I think this is actually one of the shortest of the Stephen Sondheim scores that became commercial hits. Comedy Tonight is definitely the hallmark of the show. And I think it's its most enduring number in common consciousness.
It was so good.
But then you have songs that I really love, like I love Pretty Little Picture. And fun fact, a lot of productions cut Pretty Little Picture. And I don't know why. I love I'm Calm. Hysterium, I feel like, is the musical theater version of Psyduck from Pokemon. And
that's a vile comparison to make. It's so true and so funny.
But I'm Calm is one of my favorites. I did sing it a lot when I was a teenager in musical theater classes. And anybody who knows my personality personally can tell you that Hysterium is definitely where I would lie. Although one day suitless. But then we have songs like Bring Me My Bride, and like the funeral sequence that I just felt like went on a little, like a hair too long, and I wasn't invested even after seeing the show and reading the script again for this. I wasn't really invested in why these songs were happening. When seeing the show, you have a bunch of other visual stuff to go off of that makes these songs worth watching, but just from a listening perspective, it just didn't hit. And then obviously I love That Dirty Old Man, but I think I love it for personal reasons. I'm a big Mary Testa guy. I think that's another reason why I wanted to listen to the revival recording. Nathan Lane's performance as Pseudolus is one of the best in Broadway history. And then you have, incredible talents like Mary Testa, Ernie Sabella, William Duell, Mark Lynn Baker, Jessica Bovers. Like, you have really incredible talent in that revival. So I really just want to hear Mary Testa sing That Dirty Old Man all the goddamn time as Domina. But do I think it stands the test of time in the way that other Sondheim works have? Not necessarily, and that's a personal opinion, obviously. I do think that it's probably in the top 6 Sondheim musicals of all time. And he's written plenty, but I would definitely put it at like 6 in that top 6. It has a lot of the hallmarks that would become Stephen Sondheim staples, but I think it's a fun romp, and I'm always a big fan of comedy on Broadway and like real actual musical comedy and not just like a story that ends happily. But on the flip side, I just don't know if it holds up on its own without seeing a really incredible director take it on.
Yeah, I think you can tell that he was still finding his, for lack of a better term, composer voice here. And because, like you said, there were a lot of those elements that do eventually become kind of his, like, calling cards.
I think Bert and Larry's, our good old friend Bert and Larry, because I'm not going to keep butchering your
477, baby.
Bert and Larry, I think their script, when you actually read it or watch it, is so fast-paced, but you don't lose anything. There's nothing too confusing.
Yeah.
It's not like, a musical where so much is happening that you're kind of just like, I lost the plot. The plot is very simple.
Yeah.
Because it's so simple, it allows for all the misadventures to happen around while there still being a clear through line to get us to Hero and Philia's reconciling at the end and Pseudolus's freedom at the end.
I can say from having watched as much MASH as I have that is something that these two writers do very well. And that's kind of the pocket where they thrive, of this quick banter that's so funny and very intelligent and witty, but easily understood, and you don't get lost. And it's like the comedy equivalent of your dad picking you up by the wrists and flinging you around and then very softly plopping you back down.
I love that imagery.
That's what I feel like these two as a writing duo write like, which is like absolutely the place where my little comedy loving heart lives as someone who grew up on things like MASH and Golden Girls and Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Like, that's where my comedy heart lives. Really my wheelhouse, which I feel like explains a lot about me as a person.
Oh, it does. Your entire sense of humor just came out.
Yeah, fully.
And on the flip side of Forum, we have Kiss Me Kate. Kiss Me Kate. Ba-da-da. A masterpiece, in my opinion, especially for a Golden Age musical.
You will not hear me disagree.
Especially because I think it's the most comprehensive and clear show of Cole Porter's. And Cole Porter, of course, only wrote the music and the lyrics, but Cole Porter predominantly wrote musicals with collaborators in a time where musicals were writing songs and then finding a story to kind of go around it. Rodgers and Hammerstein were the first to really change that with a story and plot driven show with Oklahoma. But even I would say Showboat and Porgy and Bess, while being very much story based, relied heavily more on their musicals to move the story rather than in the show, rather than allowing the story to dictate what happens with the song. And Anything Goes is a prominent example of the songs move the story, like the songs dictate the story rather than the story dictating the songs. But I feel like for the first time in Cole Porter's musical history, and I think the reason why it became such a success is because Kiss Me Kate is the closest to follow the format that was kind of perfected by Rodgers and Hammerstein, and is a contemporary to Oklahoma in a lot of ways. So for me, Kiss Me Kate, when you think about Golden Age musicals, and when you think about Cole Porter, is like the Cole Porter musical, and one of the greatest Golden Age musicals of all time.
Yeah, when I hear Cole Porter, I do immediately think of Kiss Me Kate. Like, there's not even a close second. It is always Kiss Me Kate. I have so many songs that I like genuinely love from the show, in and out of context.
So, shall we dive into a little of the creative and production history?
Absolutely. I am so sad.
So, Kiss Me Kate is one of the most successful and influential Broadway musicals of all time, blending Shakespeare with showbiz and introducing audiences to the musical stylings of the legendary Cole Porter. The show's combination of romance and comedy and high energy set a new bar of musical theater and left a lasting mark on the genre. Now, the idea of Kiss Me Kate actually originated with the Broadway producer Luther Davis, who had a keen interest in the notion of putting a musical adaptation on of The Taming of the Shrew with a modern twist. Taming of the Shrew, for those who don't know, is Shakespeare's comedic play about love, marriage, and the power struggles of the sexes. And Davis approached two seasoned Broadway veterans, Sam and Bella Spebick, to create a book for the musical, tapping into their experience with comedy and dialogue and theatrical structure. They also had a successful partnership with the playwright George S. Kaufman on the front page. Now, the duo saw the potential to create a farcical musical comedy set against the backdrop of a play within a play. And when it came to music, Cole Porter was the obvious choice. Porter was at the height of his career, known for his sophisticated lyrics, catchy tunes, and the ability to blend wit with musicality. Now, Porter, already an established name with hits like Anything Goes and Dewberry Was a Lady, was excited by the idea of composing songs that mixed the classic with the contemporary, and he found the Taming of the Shrew's themes to be right for both comedy and romance. After several months of development and rehearsals, Kiss Me Kate had its pre-Broadway tryout in Philadelphia in early 1948, and the production was already causing a buzz due to the combination of Cole Porter's music and the high-profile Shakespearean themes, but there were challenges in finding the right balance between comedy, romance, and the sophisticated musical numbers. The show officially opened on December 30th, 1948 at the New Century Theater in New York City. The timing was impeccable because Broadway was beginning to go into a phase of blending humor with complex character development, and Kiss Me Kate had struck the perfect chord, dazzling audiences with a lavish set, a spectacular choreography, and memorable songs. So that's a little bit about the history of Kiss Me Kate. The show had won several Tony Awards, including the first ever Best Musical, and ran for an impressive 1,077 performances, solidifying its place as one of the greatest musicals on Broadway. Let's give a little plot synopsis for Kiss Me Kate. We are in the out-of-town tryout for a brand new musical that is starring Fred Graham, who is not only just an actor in the show playing Petruchio, but also the director of the show. And who does he cast as his Catherine? None other than his ex-wife, Lily Vanessa, who is an incredible diva with a sharp tongue and an even sharper temper.
Queen, icon, I want to be her when I grow up.
Now, their relationship is already cantankerous, and she throws around the word bastard a lot with him. It's what made me fall in love with the word bastard.
That's very so valid.
But they're not the only two players in our show. We have Bill Calhoun, who is the person playing Lucentio within the show. But he's also a gambler who happens to write Fred Graham on an IOU at a casino where he just lost a bunch of money after skipping out on rehearsal. And his girlfriend, Lois Lane,
notably not the girlfriend of Superman.
No, not the girlfriend of Superman. Lois Lane, who happens to also be playing Bianca, Catherine's sister within the show, is kind of upset with him while also having a bit of a flirtation with Fred Graham, the director and actor. Yeah. But everything comes to a head on their opening night of their out-of-town tryout, and Lily and Fred are reminiscing in Lily's dressing room about the times that they used to share. And when Fred accidentally sends a gift that was meant for Lois to Lily, which happens to be an exact replica of the flowers within her wedding bouquet, she begins to feel
about that part.
Fred loves her again, and she goes into the opening of the show so excited and so ready, until it is revealed that it was meant for Lois the whole time. And to be fair, Lois is not blameless in this, because she shamelessly flirts with everybody to get what she wants within this world. She is the epitome of a bombshell. And so when Lily finds out in character, she throws a fit. And uses a scene between her and Petruchio to go off on Fred, leading to them having a bit of a spat on stage. They both exit. Fred goes upstairs and finds two gangsters in his dressing room who basically are like, hey, you owe us money. It's like, I've never seen you before. Well, they don't care about that answer. So they kind of go after him, and he says, you'll get your money if the show goes on tonight. But currently, I have a leading actress who is threatening to leave the show. And so the gangsters are like, that's not going to go down well with us. So, against your will, with her ex-husband by her side, who she's having conflicting, both romantic and angry feelings for, with her new fiance, a general in the U.S. Army, coming to get her. And meanwhile, again, two gangsters forcing her to finish the show. Her co-stars having a on-again, off-again spat about their loyalty to each other, with Bill saying that Lois is too much of a flirt and can't commit, and Lois going, you are a gambler who can't learn to just settle down with me and just be happy with what we have. You have two sets of lovers who actually just need communication in order to come together, which happens to be the themes of Taming of the Shrew. Oh, and hilarious musical comedy ensues.
Oh, of course.
So let's kind of break into our experience listening and reading and rediscovering the show again, and our thoughts on the overall show.
I will not lie. As soon as I heard another open in another show, I did start crying.
It is, again, an incredible opening number. On the flip side, like, there is not a skip song in the show.
Not a one.
Bianca, technically Bianca, because that's how he sings it, is so funny and charming. I Hate Men as a
absolutely iconic number.
That dichotomy of, like, men suck, but I love them.
Yeah.
What do I do? And it's just so brilliant. Like, he may have hair upon his chest, but sister, so has Lassie.
I mean, she was so right with that. She was so simply correct.
You may call it love, but doctors call it rheumatism. Like, what?
Brilliant.
So brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant.
Always True to You. I mean,
that's in my book, like,
it's
of audition songs. It's such a good song.
It is like flirty, sexy, fun in all the best ways.
Yeah.
And again, Cole Porter is at his best. Like, we have lyrics like, when a custom tailored vet asks me out for something wet, when the vet begins to pet, I cry hooray. Like, what? Like, what? Clark Gable? That whole lyric? Incredible. Like, it's incredible. And plus he does it twice in the show, but the false ending is one of my favorite musical theater tropes have done, right? He does it in Always True to You. And then another classic, Brush Off Your Shakespeare. He does the false ending in that. And that, if like you're about to have like a test to name all of Shakespeare's plays, at least the comedies and the tragedies, and you need to memorize it really quick,
listen to that song on repeat.
Song. That is your mnemonic device, friends. Kick her right in the Coriolanus. Oh my God, so funny.
God.
But on the flip side, also some of the most beautiful, beautiful ballads, like So in Love, is one of the best love songs of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You also have incredible dance sequences, like Too Darn Hot, which...
I will note that is the one song where I was like, I'm not going to listen to the version that you sent me. I am so simply going to watch Corbin Bleu do it again.
Which is funny, because in every production, they change who leads that number. So sometimes it is the stage manager who leads it. Sometimes it is a assistant to Fred. They always change up, like, who is the male... On
the Wikipedia page, it says Paul,
but they always change up who Paul is.
Yeah.
So Paul is either the stage manager or a production assistant or assistant to Fred.
Yeah.
Usually just...
Yeah, they change up what his role is.
Yeah.
Within the confines of the show, within the show.
The majority of the time, he is a stage manager, but usually he leads it. But when you have somebody like Corbin Bleu who can dance like Corbin Bleu, who literally was in Holiday Inn and was tap dancing while doing double dutch.
I don't even want to talk about that. Not well.
Had to use his jump experience somehow. Anyway.
I mean, you can't push it to the limit and not continue to push it to the limit.
Then you also have Tom, Dick, and Harry, which is like the harmonies in that, where like you have like Tom, Dick, or Harry. Like, it's just, it's
oh god. But Tuesday, I want to like bite it.
But it's also like, from a listening perspective, if you've never seen the show or read the script, you'd be able to follow things pretty easily, as long as you knew that some of the show takes place backstage and some of the show takes place in the world of Shakespeare. If you had some kind of inkling of that, I think the listening experience is very fairly easy to follow. Would you agree, Gabby?
Yeah, I would say it would be significantly harder if you don't know that that is a pretty major element of how this particular show works. Not knowing that would make it, I think, pretty significantly more confusing. But as long as like if even that's all you know, walking into the show is that this show is about a production of Taming of the Shrew, you're set.
Absolutely.
You're vibing.
But then we have our book, which is also just a gorgeous play without the music.
Also so strong on its own. Like, you can isolate it and it's still a brilliant show.
You care about the backstage drama and hilarity and conflicts as much as you do about the adaptation about Taming of the Shrew. And in a lot of ways, I think a lot of modern sensibilities, if we were to have written Kiss Me Kate today, would have made Taming of the Shrew take a back seat to what was happening backstage. But when you are in the world of what is happening on stage in the show within the show, they have fully realized Taming of the Shrew in musical form and have literally pulled full pages of dialogue from the Shakespearean script. And I think that is also a beautiful testament to how much they cared about it. And it's shows the strength of the book when you can look at Bill and Lois and Lily and Fred and see the parallels of the characters that they are playing within the show. Fred and Lily are definitely direct mirrors or stand-ins for Patricio and Catherine, while Bill and Lois, I feel like, are foils or the polar opposites of the characters that they're portraying, who are much more virtuous and innocent and whatever. They are a little bit less innocent and less virtuous in their endeavors.
Kind of on that note of the strength of the book, I think something that can often be a struggle when you're doing this play within a play format is it's very easy to lose the audience who aren't actors, who aren't theater people with some sort of onstage or backstage experience. And I don't think that that is the case here. People who don't have any sort of performing or any sort of theater experience can still relate to and care about these characters, which I think also is a really powerful testament to how strong the book is and how well all of the characters are written. That you don't need to be in a position similar to them to get what they're going through and root for them or want to boo for them sometimes, because sometimes they suck as people, but you still care, and that's what matters.
Absolutely. And I think the other strength of the show is the fact that it is aged probably better than a lot of other Golden Age musicals because it doesn't deal within the world of anything overtly political or have set racial or even physical descriptions or necessities for any of their actors. You could have an extremely short Lily Vanessa. You could have Lois Lane in a wheelchair. And then when it comes to race relations and the race and gender roles within the show, you could have a female gangster if you wanted, but more importantly, I feel like a lot of people would look at a show like this that is a period piece. It is set in the 1940s. It's meant to be set.
Yeah, very solidly. Yeah.
But it does not live in a world where, only the, the creative team and only the stage-hands and the costume person and are people of color, but the leads aren't. You had in the revival in the 1990s, Brian Stokes Mitchell play Fred Graham. You had Corbin Bleu play Bill Calhoun. We've had, I would have killed maybe a decade or so ago to see Audra McDonald get to do Lily Vanessa. And the beauty also in the score is that it's also incredibly versatile. You can have somebody who is more of a classical voice like Kelly O'Hara take on the role, or like I said, my favorite interpretation is Rachel York, because she is both a classically trained vocalist but also a belter. So you have a song like So in Love where she brings in a lot of those classical techniques into how she rounds her vowels and uses her vibrato and places the pitch and the tone, so it has a little bit more of an openness. But then you get into I Hate Men, which a lot of classical voices almost miss out on the comedy because they're so focused on the technique.
Making it sound right.
So you have some interpretation which are like, I hate men. And then you have Rachel York, who, again, I think is the definitive Lily Vanessa for me. I didn't get to see the West End recent production with Stephanie J. Block. I'm sure she was incredible because she's always incredible. I got to see Kelly O'Hara. I think she was also incredible, but I think Kelly O'Hara is a much better dramatic actress than a comedic actress, so it was hard for me to always see her comedic bits, and I would have killed to see Marin in the role. I think she was incredible. I loved the cast recording with her. But when you watch Rachel do I Hate Men and go, I hate men, and like belt the song rather than it also allows the moments where Kate has to go into a soprano, like in Kiss Me Kate and other numbers, to be a little bit more versatile and flexible, and you see the versatility within the performer.
Yeah, a little differentiated, to throw a education word in there.
Thank you, Miss Teacher.
That's me.
So I think it's time for us. Are you ready to jump into Final Judgment?
Absolutely.
So in the case of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum versus Kiss Me Kate. What is your verdict, Gabby?
Not guilty. Sorry, I forgot this isn't actually court. No, my verdict is very solidly. I think Kiss Me Kate kind of sweeps this round. As much as I love Sondheim, Kiss Me Kate is just such a solid show. There are so many songs that I love, and again, like we were saying, it's not like just, oh, I love these songs. It's they work so well within the context and within the confines of the show, but they also work so well without the context at all. And the strength of the characters and the plot, and it all just flows so beautifully that it's really hard to deny the power of the show.
I agree with that. My verdict is also not guilty. Is Kiss Me Kate definitely wins over Forum in this setting. I think Comedy Tonight and on Another Opening Another Show are both almost comparable in the terms of greatest opening numbers in musical theater history.
Yeah.
But then once you get past that opening number, I think the music of Cole Porter and the stuff that he written for Kiss Me Kate has permeated our common consciousness and fandom in a much stronger way than Forum. There's a reason why so many people put songs from Kiss Me Kate in their book. It's not just because you need a golden age, but because the material, because of how Cole Porter writes it. So I think for those reasons, and also just because it is a perfect marriage between book and score, I think that Kiss Me Kate definitely does win in this bracket showdown for our first
So Reddit's verdict was also not the asshole.
Beautiful. Love to hear it.
Make sure to follow us on all of our socials. If you are watching this on YouTube, check out the description below. We will have all of our socials linked there where you can follow us, keep posted for updates, and if you guess the next set of shows correctly, you can get that really nifty shout out that we gave at the beginning of the video.
And if you happen to like these two kooky personalities you see in front of you, and happen to also be fantasy lovers and maybe even D&D lovers, make sure to check out our other available podcast right now, Crit Starters, which is going to be a D&D adventure for the ages, where we will do a series of different one-shots, and then for a 4-episode arc, you're going to get to choose what characters get to play.
I've been doing some plotting and planning recently. I think if there are any D&D nerds out there, I think you guys are really going to like what I have cooked up for the first episode.
I know nothing, so I'm so excited. Well, until next time, this has been Jay.
And Gabby.
And it's intermission. We'll let you know when your 5 to places is. Thanks.
Thank you, 5.